3SCR, KC Radio, 3SCR, KC Radio.
Hey, it's Severin Browne with John Broughton on Retrospectives on 3SCR, KC Radio.
I believe your father was an early influence on you in developing a musical interest.
Absolutely. He was a Dixieland pianist, and we would basically fall asleep. When I was a kid, I used to fall asleep to the sound of his jazz band playing in the next room. And he always had the piano, and he'd play for the family, and yeah, there was lots of music around. Yeah.
Was he a professional musician at all?
Yes. Yeah, he played gigs at night and worked a day job. He never. I don't know whether he actually. He was never really successful as far as making recordings, but he was always playing.
Now, did you have formal music lessons as a youngster?
Yeah, I started guitar lessons when I was about 10, and I would start and stop and start and stop, and I pretty much had enough of that by the time I was 13 or 14 and started giving lessons.
Now, you found yourself involved with the Motown label, which must have been an unusual for an artist such as yourself to be involved with the Motown label. Not really the musical genre that they're known for. What led you there?
Well, I've always loved Motown. I mean, I've always loved the music, the R&B. I've always had that jazz and R&B influence. I mean, the old '60s rock and roll things, rock and roll and R&B. I mean, I was right there. I had bands in high school, and I played all that stuff. So when I had the opportunity to join up with Motown, boy, I jumped at it. I really didn't think of myself as being so separate at the time. It was later on that sort of dawned on me. Yeah.
Were they also at the time looking to branch out musically too, I guess?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. At the time I signed the record company, when I signed with Motown, Elton John had just made a splash in Hollywood, and it was pretty certain that Elton John was going to be big. I mean, he just played the troubadour, and everybody was just going bonkers over who is this Elton John guy? Wow, he's the greatest, and so basically I was going to be their Elton John.
Yeah.
That's the term that was thrown around and all that BS. But I basically found my own sort of category there.
I think you went there initially with ambitions of being a staff songwriter. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a staff songwriter there. I guess about 9 or 10 months before I signed to the record deal.
And was that really the extent of your ambitions at that stage? I think you weren't all that keen to record originally, were you?
No, I wasn't. I just wanted to. I just wanted to write songs and get them cut by other people. Believe it or not, one of my big ambitions at the time was to get something cut by Andy Williams.
Right.
Because I thought, man, if Andy Williams does it, then I'm a songwriter. Because Andy Williams, was cutting things by just a whole diverse group of people, and but still he would tend to make them his own. And I thought, well, if a song is good enough that he'd cut it, I'd be happy.
Yeah. So how did they eventually twist your arm into recording?
Well, when I first went up there to actually play for the publishing people, I was playing for these two guys at Joe Bett Music, their publishing arm, and as I was playing, Berry Gordy walked in, and those two guys had never seen Berry Gordy in person before, much less met him. They had never seen him. They didn't know he was in town, and he walked into the room and listened and asked me some questions and then left, and these two guys that I was playing for, their jaws had dropped open basically, at seeing the big star, the big guy, walk into their office, and And one of Barry's lawyers, came in and offered me a deal, offered me a staff songwriting deal. And at the time, I mean, I was young and I didn't even know that stuff was available really. So I took it home and had some people look at it, and then I signed. And I thought it was a great move. I thought it was a real good move for me at the time.
Do you think now in hindsight perhaps Motown's lack of experience in working with singer-songwriters might have worked against you a bit?
There's two ways of looking at it. Yeah, sure. It might have worked against me a little bit, but it also gave me so much experience that I just, there's just no way that I would give up that experience now.
Yeah.
It just gave me a lot of, growth experience. And sure, I mean, I had when I was on Motown. I mean, after I signed with Motown, somebody casually dropped that Shelter had been interested in me, and I sort of kicked myself a couple times, but like Shelter being a big hip label at the time.
It was Leon Russell's label, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And but there you go. I mean, we do what we do. And sometimes it's a good move, and sometimes it's not. But I'm not going to look back and say it was a wrong move, because I wouldn't be where I am today. If I'd done things differently, or maybe I would. I don't know.
So what prompted you to just walk away from a recording career after those two albums?
I was. It wasn't that I walked away. I was. Well, here's what happened. I had decided that I wasn't really happy with the recording end, but I still had a couple more years to go on the contract. And so what I did is I basically I convinced Motown and everybody around me, not realizing that my manager would go for this. I managed to make everybody around me think that I wasn't going anywhere. And I thought it was a real good snafu until my manager dropped me too. And then I was sort of realized, I sort of overdid this. I actually presented some tunes to Motown for a third album. And there was a Steve Bishop tune on there, and some tunes that I had written, and they just, I guess they weren't too impressed. And I was also being sort of flaky and wise ass,
Yeah.
And
so
they dropped me.
It wasn't your original intent to just disappear from recording for 20 years. It just happened that way.
Excuse me?
It wasn't your original intent just to disappear from the recording scene for 20 years. It just more or less happened.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. And it sort of snowballed from there. And I was hoping to go on and look at some of those other possibilities, some of the other labels that had shown some interest over the years. But when my manager dropped me, I sort of, took a long step back and took a while to recover from that.
Do you regret that move now?
I don't know that regret would be the word that I would choose. I see how it may have gone differently, and I may have been successful had I done things differently, but success does not necessarily mean happiness. And sometimes we need to suffer the ups and downs in life in order to grow.
Yeah, sure.
And although obviously none of us really want to suffer those downs when we're in it, but in hindsight we can say, well, we've grown from that.
So in that 20-year space between albums, how active did you remain musically? I mean, you continued writing and playing for yourself?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. here's what I did. After I was, let me see, I guess I left the Motown deal in, what was it, 75, I guess. By 1978, 77 or 78, I had begun playing again, and playing in clubs, and I'd actually formed a band, and I'd had a manager then. And we started making a noise in Hollywood, but the manager that I had was really. I'm afraid she was a great worker, but I'm afraid she had her troubles, and it sort of fell apart too. And so over the years after that, I started putting things together little by little and writing little by little, and I would have a band and I'd let it go, and then I'd do something else for a while and let it go. But so this album, From the Edge of the World, has a whole bunch of songs that were written over the years, over a large scope. I mean, like 20 years. If I Loved You, no, not If I Loved You. Leaving You is the Hardest Thing I've Known, which is the last cut on the record. Have you got that record?
At the moment, I don't know, but I'm going to track one down for sure.
Yeah, the last cut on the record was actually written. Oh, and the second cut on the record, Worth. They were actually both written back in 1977-ish, and all the rest of, some of the later ones, like From the Edge of the World and Mystery, and those are like much more recent. Uptown, but
they certainly had a large backlog of material to draw from there.
Yeah, you betcha.
So obviously, just from talking to you now, obviously get the impression that and success has never really been a prime motivating factor for you in terms of your music. It's never been a great deal to seek that great commercial notoriety.
Well, I think the main word that you can put toward my career is inconsistent. Because sometimes I'll go for it, and sometimes I'll just say, what am I doing? I'm not going to be happy in doing this, and then I'll back off. And it'll go back and forth, saying, well, I can do this and be happy, and then 6 months later I'll think, my God, I can't do this and be happy. So, also I have the, I have the ability to look at my brother, who is very successful, and say, well, is he happy? And, sometimes he is, sometimes he's not. But would I be happy doing what he's doing? I don't know.
You don't know.
It's a rough question. That's a big one right there. When I go to a big place to see him perform, do I want to put up with that stuff? No, I'd much rather play small places. Sure, I'd love to continue making the best music that I can make, and I'd love to visit Australia and Japan and lots of places that I haven't seen. But I'd like to do it on a smaller scale.
Yeah. Speaking about your brother, has it been an issue for you at all over the years, or a source of annoyance, having people or critics in particular often comparing your work to his?
Well, yeah, it has been a source of annoyance at times. The biggest annoyance has been on a personal level. I realize that people really like to associate themselves somehow with celebrity, and that's where I've gotten the most annoyed, is when people have done that. I realize that like for promotion purposes, people like to people like to see Jackson Browne's brother.
Yeah.
You know, but it still annoys me.
Have the two of you ever sat down and written together?
No. Well, actually, once he had a tune, a song called Daddy's Tune, on one of his early albums in the 70s, and he wanted me to write part of it. He got to a point where he didn't like it anymore, and I looked at what he didn't like, and I thought, my God, that is the best part of the tune, you idiot. You know. Anyway, so I wrote a silly thing that I thought might be in keeping with the verse rather than breaking off into this up-tempo thing that he had, and he didn't use it. You know, it's like, I mean, I thought that what he... Are you familiar with the tune?
Vaguely, yeah.
Vaguely.
Yeah.
I mean, what it does is it's got kind of a low tempo, and then it breaks into the shuffle. Da 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 da. And that was the part he didn't like. And see, that's the only part I remember right now. And that's the part that I really liked. And so, I mean, I didn't like the idea of replacing that, you know, with something just because, you know, we have the same dad and we're writing about him, right?
Yeah.
It was really a nice gesture on his part to bring me in, but it didn't work out. I ended up singing on the record, though.
Now let's talk a bit more about your most recent album. Do you remember a point in time where that particular urge came to you to want to get back in and record again?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you the story of that one. Back in, let me see. I don't know, back in the 80s sometime, I had a band and I was playing at a club in Santa Monica. And this Japanese guy came up to me and introduced himself and said that he had worn out 2 or 3 of my records in Japan and didn't know where to get another, you know. And I was very pleased, and of course I remembered him years later. We ended up, both of us, going to the same jazz school. We went to the Dick Grove School in Hollywood. It's a jazz school. And we got together there and wrote a little bit. And then years after that, we got together. He called me again and said, hey, let's finish that tune we started back at the Dick Grove School. Now I've got a recording deal. I'm producing a lot of other people. So let's get together and write. And so I got together with him, and we wrote, I guess, 2 or 3 tunes for that record that he was doing. And we would always go have sushi and talk about, you know, what was next, you know. And at one point he said, well, you know, it's about time you made another record. And I said, well, I don't know. We'll see. You know, and so basically little by little he talked me into it. And so I have him to thank for it, really, and I did thank him on the CD. He produced the CD also.
How did it feel to be back in the studio again? Was it just like starting all over again?
Well, you know, with a little bit more experience, I guess. Yeah. I like it a lot. I do.
So
and working with Yoshio was a lot of fun because he has a lot of the same jazz influences that I do. And I really enjoyed it a lot.
So you're comfortable in the studio environment?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Now, how advanced are plans afoot for another CD?
Well, we were actually planning on doing it this month, but the best laid plans and all that. So I really don't know when it's going to happen, but we are planning on doing another one, Yoshio and I, for the same label. The same label, I should say, in the U.S. I don't know that it'll be the same. In fact, I doubt that it'll be the same Japanese label. But Yoshio, the producer, runs the American subsidiary that it was released on. The Japanese label was Tokuma for The Edge of the World, and I really don't know who the worldwide label is going to be for this next one.
I was browsing through your website the other day, and you mentioned before you like to do things on a smaller scale. One thing that caught my eye was the house concerts that you've been arranging.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and where the idea came from.
Well, it's an old idea. It's an old idea where people just get together and have a party and play music. But it's sort of sweeping the country now, the U.S. anyway, where I know a number of people who have arranged like a tour where they will play. They'll play like clubs and coffee houses all over the country. But then what they'll do is they'll send out emails to a lot of people and get people to host house concerts. And for me, I think that's a really it's a great way of connecting with people. I'm doing one this coming Saturday, and basically what I'm doing is I'm bringing a sound system. I'm setting up in this guy's backyard. He's going to have about 50 or 60 or 70 people there, and I'm just going to play for 2 or 3 hours and tell stories and have a good time and drink, party basically.
Fantastic. So the response has been pretty good so far.
Everyone who has been to a house concert that I've spoken with has just come away saying, "Wow, that's great." But many people, when they hear the idea of house concert, I mean, they want to go to the Forum, or the Santa Monica Civic, and they want to see someone, someone they've heard on the radio, maybe.
Yeah.
And right now I haven't got anything on the radio, so it's kind of neat. I like it.
Now, another thing that caught my eye was your songwriting tutorial service. Tell us about that one.
Well, there are a number of people who write songs, and I've had a bit of experience with helping people finish tunes, and not necessarily being a writer, but like my song "Worth" on this album. I mentioned that I'd written it back in the 70s. What happened there was a friend of mine, Larry Keane, had started it with his friend Richard Pollack and didn't know where to go with it, and sort of gave it to me, and I gave it a direction. I mean, being an outside objective person, I could see the direction that it might possibly go, and I gave him a couple ideas. And then he said, "Run with it," so I ran with it and actually finished the tune for him. But in my songwriting service, what I hope to do is give people options, give people ideas.
You think that by sitting down and evaluating other people's work will also help you sharpen up your own songwriting skills?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's my motives are not so pure after all. I mean, I do have the. I'm very high on experience. I think experience is the best thing that I can get for myself right now. A lot more than money or notoriety. If I can get the experience of a lot of things under my belt, the writing, the playing, then I'm a better man for it.
Have you found as you've got older and more experience that songwriting has become easier, or still go through those periods of songwriter's block, I guess you could call it?
Yeah, sure. I still go through block, but and songwriting has changed quite a bit for me. When I was younger, I wanted very much to write songs about the same things that I was actually thinking about. I mean, I was thinking, I was reading books on philosophy, and but I could not seem to write anything that was the least bit philosophical in my songs. Every time I did, it came out sounding it came out sounding so corny and bad and ugly and shit, and I just ended up throwing it all away, all that stuff. what I'm doing now is I'm writing. I'm taking more time with things. Like when I was at Motown, basically, I mean, we were taught basically to write a song and bring it under 3 minutes. 2 minutes 40 seconds was the perfect time for a fade. I'm not so much worried about that anymore, and I'm not so much worried about coming out with a song every week.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to do is I mean, there's some of these songs on this record, From the Edge of the World, that took a couple years to write. My song Mystery, that you'll hear when you finally get a hold of the record, is it took about 4 or 5 years to write that thing. And my song Dance Until Tomorrow was actually had another title before. I mean, it took a few years to write that too, but it's not done until it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, now I can. Those are 2 of the more recent songs on this record. My next record is going to have all recent tunes on it, so hopefully they'll be of a little bit stronger quality. And I hope to keep on making CDs and have each one be higher quality and higher quality as I go.
So the editing process is really important for you now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes I self-edit myself too much. I've got a song right now that I've had the music to for over 10 years, or some of the music, I should say. I remember writing this music when I lived in New Orleans, and I lived in New Orleans in 1988. And
You're working on it.
Yeah, it just hasn't gelled yet.
Yeah.
So it may just this version may gel. I mean, it's more of the philosophical side, but I also have to work in the very a personal angle because I like my songs to do that.
How critical do you get of your own work? Are you extra hard on yourself?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm very. You have to be. You have to be somewhat self-critical. And sometimes I'm too critical. Sometimes I'm not critical enough. What I used to do, and I hopefully don't do that anymore, but I used to try and finish things before they were done. Mm-hmm. I used to call things done before they were actually good enough. And by doing that, I actually cheated myself out of maybe some better lyrics if I had just stuck with it a little bit longer.
Selling yourself a bit short.
You betcha.
Yeah.
You betcha. Now I'm not. I'm older now, and it's just not important to me. To call something done before it's done.
You also teach guitar, and you mentioned earlier you've been teaching, or you've taught guitar when you were even as a teenager. What would be your major emphasis in your guitar teaching methods?
Well, basically, what does what does a student want to learn? What kind of music? Of course, I think the basics are really important. The basics of reading music, and also I from the Dick Grove School where I went for a year, I lived and breathed music theory for a whole year, which really strengthened my whole musical life. Basically, this was in 1984 to 85. So I lived and breathed music theory for a year, and I've got a way that I believe makes music theory come alive. At least it does for me. And I'm still working on it, actually. I've tried presenting it that way to a few students. Some have really gone for it. Some just haven't been ready.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still working on it.
Okay, Severin, look, I want to thank you for your time this morning. Just to wind up, what's on your books for the next few months? What are immediate plans?
My immediate plans?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to take a little bit of a vacation. I'm going to be going to New Orleans and possibly the Kerrville Music and Wine Festival.
I hear so much about that festival.
Excuse me?
I hear so much about that festival. It must be wonderful.
Well, this is not the music festival.
Oh, it's not.
This is at the same place. It's put on by the same people, but the Kerrville Music Festival, I think, is when is it? It's like June or July or something. This is a wine festival,
right.
But they also have some of the cream of the crop of the musicians playing, and so it's not. It's only one weekend, and there's still going to be some good music people there, but we'll also be tasting some Texas wines, which I think is. I thought it was kind of a funny idea. I didn't know Texas had wineries.
No.
But we live and we learn. Yeah.
Sounds terrific. Okay, Severin, look, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been a treat talking to you.
Well, it's great talking to you too, John.
And I'll be sure to mention your website to my listeners so they can track you down, look up about your songwriting tutorials and house concerts. And
sure, you can also. I don't know whether the CDs are available. And in record stores still there, but if not, you can get them on my website, the SeverinBrowne.com.
Order them directly from you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks again, Severin.
Thank you, John.
All the best.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.